This talk and the JavaScript for WordPress conference are brought to you by our sponsors at 10up and WP Buffs. 10up makes a better web with finely crafted websites and tools for content creators. Check out their junior and senior dev positions at 10up.com/careers. WP Buffs provides 24/7 fully managed support and white label agency services. Find out how they can help you focus on what you do best at wpbuffs.com/partnerships.
So for too long, designers and developers, sorry, I'm just checking whether you can see my slides there. For too long, designers and developers have worked with a gaping void between them. JavaScript and the current state of technology means we are meeting closer on that experience bridge. And we really can now start creating products that people want, that people need, and they deserve. User experience is what we all, no matter what role, should be focusing on. The experience online has come a long way. It started with just text. Then we formed images with that text. And then we got higher and higher fidelity. And these images then became more human, more real, and they became like everything around us. And now with everything possible, experience matters and really is demanded. User experience isn't just about visuals. It is a lot more than that. And thinking of it in terms of this iceberg, that kind of makes a lot of sense. A lot of what is experience is truly invisible and not something limited to a role, such as design. It's not even about the obvious things. If you think of an offline world experience, let's think of a good meal. There's the food, sure, but there's the service, the environment, the smells, the sounds, the cost, the people eating at the same place, the drinks, the cutlery, the crockery. It's not just the table. What about beyond that, the space that you're eating within? The entrance hall, the lighting, it all adds up to the entire experience. Good experience is empowering, enabling, and it's not just something designers should do. Whilst possibly a matter for debate, personally, if I'm painting kind of a broad stroke, the following ingredients I would really say and point to as to what makes up experience. That's psychology, usability, design, copyright, and analysis. Psychology, well, because you're dealing with humans here, so understanding them is key. And usability kind of is a baseline. If an experience isn't usable, what really is the point of that? And design, this is a whole term, but only, and really wide, but only a part of the user experience. And no, design can be technical too, and all too often isn't thought of in that context. And then copywriting, the actual copy, the instructions, the engagement, the voice, the tone. And finally, analysis. What is the point without data to make educated decisions and a better experience? There probably is none. So whilst I shared my ingredients in the past slide, I often like to kind of give people this graphic from Peter Morville because it's a really good way of thinking about the basics of user experience. This is the experience honeycomb, and I'm going to just kind of say the words because I think they're really emotive to kind of hook into. Useful, usable, valuable, desirable, findable, credible, accessible. It's all things we kind of expect from an experience, and it's a more modular approach as this honeycomb encourages. A user, when interacting with an experience, has a very particular mental model. And mental models are based on beliefs, not facts. It may be yours and it might not be someone else's. That's really a key point when thinking about this. And sometimes and quite often groups of different people have different mental models. A good experience balances the conceptual and the mental model. The conceptual model is actually what the interface gives the actual thing that you're interacting with. And making sure those things are balanced really is key to a good experience. The problem is user experience is tightly linked to design in many minds, companies, and processes. That's the reality. This is a thought process we all need to shift out from. It's not mine as a designer, the sole responsibility, and it shouldn't be. Technology has moved to a place where the line is no longer that clear. Developers are becoming design infused, and the battle is being won there, and it's incredible to be watched. Design itself as a concept is changing, opening to allow computational designers and glorious hybrids that embrace across the roles. When all is said and done, none of the roles or divisions we clutch to like truth and adorn around ourselves actually even matter. Experience is what truly matters. This is how someone achieves what they are really trying to do, what they experience. It's simple, but it's something we tend to make so complicated in the products that we create because it's not at the heart of what we are creating. I want you to, for a moment, imagine a product. Let's imagine an online store. The achieving here is going to be quite simple. You want to buy something. That's the purpose of this. But what if the experience be like if searching for a product took over 4 minutes to run and you had to sit there waiting for that? Pages to find that one because they're other quick route to it. Or what about if on checkout it crashed every single time you added your address? That's the basic functionality here is the experience. And if that fails, you can't use the product. You lose trust and the experience bond is broken and likely you're never going to be using that online store again. In simple terms, we need to be united across all roles, focusing on better how products are made and how experiences happen. This splitting into roles has divided and, quite frankly, created a fragmented experience. I'm sure we've all been to sites that suffer from this, ones where maybe the design is amazing, but everything you are doing is like clicking through treacle. Or where it's blazing fast, but it actually looks like the style sheet has been forgotten completely. By truly coming together, we can learn, advise, and focus on really the best experience possible. Divided, there's this kind of brutal danger of this disconnect that is felt all too often in the product. When it comes down to it, this is about focusing on the product, and that, I hope you agree, is incredibly important. The person interacting with the experience does so based on the experience. They don't see roles, they aren't seeing these divides. This is a great diagram for what affects user experience. The product itself, the actual thing being delivered, the concept, the tech, the technology, how it is being delivered, and the design. And this is pretty simple simmering down, but everything affects user experience. And being fragmented about the approach never gets the best experience. I want you to ask yourself a question. Have you ever, when you're making something, questioned whether you should create it? It's really, really important to take a step outside and think about the impact of what is being made, because the impact is key. And is going to be far more key as the world of AI and bots we've trained with all the human biases of those who are training them. A starting point to meeting on the experience bridge is for everyone creating the experience to look beyond their headspace. Understanding all the messy gloriousness that is about really being a human is key to unlocking the potential of your product. Knowing and embracing something called stress cases, and I'm going to get to that in a little bit. These people who get caught, those in crisis using the product, these give you insights that truly you can't get otherwise. Those making products, and that's us, tend to live pretty privileged lives when it comes down to it. We're all human, and absolutely, we all walk different paths. But the fact that we can make and do what we do puts us in a pretty exclusive group. Technology shouldn't be about that. As this quote says, none of us really signed up to build this exclusive web. I know I didn't. This needs to change. And technology and the experiences we create can include, can empower. We get there by moving beyond our headspace, stepping out of our comfort and truly understanding, listening, and seeing all the diversity that there is to be a human. Empathy really isn't just for design or designers. If you aren't getting the feels when you're making a product, I've got news for you, you are making it wrong. I am not saying you should be gushing or emoting everywhere, but being connected to those who you are creating the experience for, feeling what they do in a small part, that's really should be the baseline for creating an experience that matters and connects. Threading feels throughout the team actually makes it stronger, and it knits together and binds everybody in a common vision of who you are creating for and their experience. Going back to the words that I said before, we all too often say edge case. But the problem with that is it dismisses. That leaves us room for saying, meh, doesn't matter. It's just an edge case. Stress is bad. We all know that. Nobody wants to cause stress to someone else. So let's start by using this word stress cases, and then let's start avoiding and working to not have stress cases. I'll be clear, I don't actually think anybody creating something has the intention of causing stress to another human. It's often this blinkered bubble creating a product that leaves us there, and it has to change. Eric Meyer actually experienced a stress case when the Facebook year in review showed him a smiling picture of his daughter that had passed away that year. This was a case of not coding for the worst case, or even just human cases. The stress cases weren't even on the radar. And Google still has a Discover This Day feature. It's not opt-in. And why is that? The moment you go to your Google page, it's there. I know because it's happened to me. It's there and showing these photos. Imagine if this is someone taking photos of something they didn't want a reminder of like this. Life happens, and we need to design as if it does, not as if people live in some utopian bubble where life never actually happens. This becomes more and more important with things like machine learning that we need to teach this humanity to. Another stress case is not using on desktop, where it feels like every single experience is designed for a high-end spec computer. We all know that feeling when a site is squashed into a tiny, tiny, tiny place, which means you can't even interact with it. JavaScript has broken down the roles in ways potentially, I would say, no other technology has before. The lines are blurred, and that's such a good thing, but it needs a mental shift. Interactions, for example, are incredibly personal. It's important that with this push, those developing understand some basic principles and exactly how these technologies can benefit and also harm the experience. And the first point I really would say is possibly one of the most important, and that is performance. In simple terms, if there's no performance of the experience, there is pretty much very little point to it. Nobody is going to want to repeat something like that. It's a fast track to fail. And the data speaks for itself. I'd like to share some data from this particular link. Pinterest built their pages for performance, realizing a 40% reduction in perceived wait times. And this increased search engine traffic and signups by 15%. That's huge. Also, another data point is the BBC on the other end found they lost an additional 10% of users for every single additional second their site took to load. That's just clear that performance really, really matters. So you know this feeling you get when you're trying to connect to something, this loading, and it continues to load, and more. This is a stress case. Performance is not getting the experience you want at that point. The feeling you get when you see loaders like this, loading. It seems endless. You end up moving your head almost around, following loader. That same stress goes into any experience that doesn't meet what someone needs and they have this need gap. The total page size has been steadily increasing since at least 2011. This isn't news, this is a huge problem. This impacts directly the experience and fractures beyond any design fix. It's a foundation. Simply, if the experience is too slow, then there's no way someone is going to want to use it. Measures like this tweet mentions, saving these kind of wasted renders and being able to pinpoint those drains in React, this is really cool stuff. React continues to push and improve performance, providing tools to optimize. There's some serious performance improvements in latest versions as well, and this all adds up to a better experience for everyone. This subject of performance becomes even more a priority when you move off the desktop onto mobile. The cost of data plans is decreasing, and many countries are mobile first, skipping desktops almost completely. This means not only their preferred experience is mobile, it's literally their only experience. It's also worth noting the mobile you think they'll access it on, it's not that mobile. It's about, again, thinking beyond the headset space of those that are creating it. Testing on a shiny latest iPhone, it just isn't the reality many are experiencing. Performance should be about optimizing for the worst case, not the best privilege. Having a performance budget really is the baseline for experience, and I would encourage everyone to focus on doing this. And it goes beyond just that developer mindset into just a product. Everyone should be considering this. There should be a limit set on current time-related operations that a product can't exceed. If you kind of think a little bit of psychology in this, the following is a good guide to interactions and what really is expected. You know, on the low end, it's instant, there's no delay at all. And then this goes up. But you also have to be a little bit careful. Too fast can actually not be as good for an experience. The kind of perfect spot is that 2 to 5 seconds where someone is in that flow of using the experience. Technology has moved on enough to go a step beyond, to create these truly, as is mentioned here, rich web applications. This link kind of goes more into this and talks about an interface that can react on user input. A user interface can be self-updating and react to those data changes. And you wrap all this up with predictive behavior, you get the experience that people deserve and desire really starting to happen. And JavaScript has enabled unique opportunities, and it's time to fully embrace them. If you aren't focusing on performance, then you're really not focusing on experience at all. Aside from performance, the next step, I would say, on the bridge is through designers and developers working together to create interactions. A whole world of possibilities is open thanks to technology around now. So a lot of this starts with something called micro-interactions. This is what they are. They're contained product moments that revolve around a single use case. They have one main task. So they can support and enhance, but I will add a note of caution to not have them distract. An experience with too many micro-interactions thrown at it isn't actually an experience someone wants to use because it's an animated film. There are some basic principles of micro-interactions that I felt it was worth sharing now, because it's something that I would encourage everyone to explore. And I share this as knowing them helps really rein in, but also means everyone can have a shared understanding of what they are creating. So these are three. The first is continuity. This keeps a continuous flow. So this should be subtle enough that you are carried along with the flow, but you don't notice it. Then you have predictability. I'm going to have this as a bit of a repeat theme in this talk, but no surprises. People don't like surprises when it comes to experience on general. It really should add to the flow. And then transformability. Fluid transitions are key, and taking someone along and a different state at the end. You can see this a little bit with this kind of flow of an interaction here. A trigger happens. Something runs because something happens, that state for an action. It changes. The routine, the interaction that you either at the end get a reward by a change in state or maybe feedback about the state that you're now in. And then loops sometimes happen if it's an interaction loop, but this can also just be a single contained moment in time like this. And the micro interactions as kind of, you can have these as these single things, or you can link up to build. And I'm going to show you a little bit of an example of that now. This is an example of how a few micro interactions add up to create an interactive search. This is all done using React, and is something that really enhances, but it doesn't dominate and isn't preventing someone actually using it for what it's intended to do. I really adore this little human shake of the input box to say, nope, that's not right, and it's a bad input. So I have a little bit of a warning. You need to start from a place of user research and understanding when considering interactions. And whilst it can be a moment of grief, most don't make it a moment of facepalm, as performance and other experiences really just suffer. User experience is all about that balance. These frivolous interactions, whilst delightful, can really just get in the way. For example, on the left, this is a kind of fancy graphics, but it kind of doesn't add anything. It really doesn't enhance the experience. It looks pretty, but no. Whereas on the right, that kind of little blip blop as you kind of interact really does add to the experience and still means it's usable. I'd like to say one final note of caution before stepping away from micro interactions. Remember how creating an experience for all is really, really key. Well, what I think of as really being fluffy and cute, you might not. It's very likely that, in fact. And after a few cycles of this cute GIF, it almost tips to being annoying. Going to leave it running for a little bit more. It's probably getting less cute each cycle. And that's what cute animation can happen. Beyond repeating actually being the downfall of cute in this sense, inappropriate cuteness is just the worst. For example, imagine writing a blog post about being fired only to have the system on publishing celebrated with balloons, confetti, and dancing pandas. That's not really what you want, right? Anticipation is also another area of interaction where development can help. And this is almost an emerging field, I would have said. This comes down to, I will say, predicting in a non-creepy way, because it can be done in also a creepy way. You could say this really has to be expected, not predicted experiences, because you need to expect them and not be surprised. As humans, we really don't handle surprise very well. We might think we do, but we don't. And nobody likes surprise AI. To truly do this well, you need that core ingredient of user experience to be understood, and that's psychology. After all, you have to understand what it means to be human, because a human is interacting with this experience. As more and more experiences bond and dive deeper into connecting with those using, the understanding of how the flesh computer, that's humans, we are flesh computers, and how it works is crucial. This is where psychology comes in, and I would encourage every single person working on an interface and an experience that interacts with a human to get even a basic understanding of psychology. It's worth noting at the end, I'm going to give a link that includes some further reading subjects, because you really should be trying to have an understanding of the human that is interacting here. And the good news is humans work a lot like computers. It's also pretty fun exploring what helps you and helps you to understand you better in the end, which is pretty cool. Predicting when done in a natural way can actually be impactful, like this in a browser search. Customer service is actually normally pretty hard to find, and being able to do this gets you that customer service, that predicted and most likely thing that you would need in that stress case. Well, again, searching for a phone number on Google, something like this is really useful to have. It gives me every detail I need, and it's pretty useful. It's not creepy. It's actually helpful. Every single thing adds up to the user experience. Again, this is about making that best product possible. Every single decision actually will impact the experience on either side, finding that balance. And going back to that earlier diagram, there is always a direct impact and a cost. And that's crucial to remember and repeat during the creation. Ultimately, it all really should come down to the goal of presenting customers with the best you as your team can create. Nothing else really matters because they deserve it. The story of the experience is also a key point that I want to kind of bring up here. What journey are people going to actually experience when they interact, when they use it? What are they going to go on? Where the heroine succeeds by being victorious in sign up or something like that. Stories matter to all, and it matters that everybody all should know this before the creation of something and really work out that story arc like a film. And similarly, the stories of those experiencing an existing product helps identify hurdles and holes and those stress cases. So Donna Lookout in her book has a quote which I think is incredibly powerful when thinking about stories. They're part evolutionary feature, part survival mechanism, harking back to Paleolithic times, part communication tool, story powers the human brain. This is also just one visual way of really telling these stories. There's lots of different ones, but I want to show and share something that I think I would encourage you to start exploring as a bit of a practice. So this is an example of an arc. And this is something that Donna goes through how the story would be. She uses the example of Back to the Future. You can kind of see how a film could be plotted on this arc. You have the exposition, and the kind of bit that starts. Then you have the rising action to a crisis point, a climax, will they, won't they? Generally, you can also hear almost the soundtrack of the film going along with this, right? And then you have the falling action down to the closure point. Every good story ends up with a closing point, once upon a time and happily ever after, or an end point. Here's an example with an experience on top of it. So maybe you have the problem of being able to sign up. So you go through a crisis of maybe you can't find things, maybe the sign up doesn't work. Is it going to work? Is it not going to work? And then sign up happens. Then everything goes back to the closure point. And the difference between the exposition and closure point is a change has happened. A story has been told. You reach the closure point different to the one you entered in the exposition. And this could be lots of little story arcs throughout a product and throughout an experience, because experiences add up to the general experience of the interface and the general experience of using something. But also it could be the whole story of an application, for example. I'm just getting a message, so I'm just checking whether this is still playing or not. Is this still playing? Cool. Some questions. I'm going to see actually if I can answer some questions now. I'm going to answer these at the end if that's okay for everybody.
I think that's totally great.
Cool, thank you. So I'm going to now move on to tone matters, because this is really, really important. If given a space, I will rant to pretty much anyone about stopping using the word submit on any button. It's just quite frankly rude. Would you truly go up to another human and say that? Yeah, you wouldn't. Just kind of think about that a little bit, right? The tone, both in style, flow, and actual words, really matters so much. From error messages that mean nothing, why do we even bother saying them if they're nonsense to anyone apart from a developer, who even then has to actually Google it because it makes no sense to them? Another issue really is preaching copy, overly patronizing signups, and shouty demanding forms. The tone, just like in any conversation, really, really matters. And respect comes in understanding also the patterns of expected behavior. Look at this form. This form shows no respect or any understanding at all of these bits of behavior. The asterisks are literally reversed to what you'd expect. Just look at it for a moment. Optional fields are denoted by an asterisk. So this form, thankfully, doesn't exist anymore. But it raises a point as well. If you ask for details that you don't use, that's a huge problem. Imposing, for example, binary gender roles creates real human issues and points of stress for everybody. Forms are an easy way of finding lack of respect. This time, the sheer size of this form, I mean, can you just imagine finding this form and interacting with it? Yes, there's this extension, but can you sort of kind of save in different browsers? But why do we assume that people really know this? Why? It's just kind of like, you have to think about this for a moment. To use this and for it to be usable, we have to have that knowledge. We can do better, and really we can meet each other by using that technology. Error messages also often have Q, and then that's also a problem because they actually lose info, and it's almost like you're mocking someone when they're in a moment of crisis as well. That's not great. That's not cool at all. These are your chances really to make good, because there's this phrase to err is human, and it's really, really important. We should embrace this and accept that life happens. You know, it comes down to how you handle these messages, how you handle Slack pings for questions, how you handle error messages, all these kind of different things. That's what it comes down to. If a setting can cause an error, think of alternative defaults. Think of that. Try and at least cover some of those holes that people are just going to fall into when they're having an experience. As humans, we really don't do well when we're frustrated. We have this primal brain that really doesn't think well. It doesn't kind of grok that at all. It's bad when we run on that primal brain. When an experience goes against this, our expected patterns of behavior and our brain just breaks. Think of an example of moving through a building. And go with me on a little bit of a mental journey. The first door is going to open outward. We're going to walk a little bit more. And then the second door is going to open outward. So we're walking through this lovely corridor. And we come to the third door. Again, it opens outward. So you've passed through 3 doors and they've all opened outward. On the fourth, you go up to it and you bash your nose on it as it actually opens inward. This is what happens to a lot of people using an experience. So remember, in the experience honeycomb, where the word credible was seen, without trust, the experience shatters. There's no point to the experience. In these days of GDPR and privacy concerns, quite rightly, Trust is even more important than ever. And whilst this could be a whole talk itself, and I'm passing quite lightly over this, it really builds up. It's part of that honeycomb, part of that essential genetics to the experience. So I've said we are, and we need really to meet on that experience bridge. And that's all well and good, but what if you don't feel you are? How can you? I wanted to share a few ways that you can start to recognize this and actively meet there. The first, it sounds so simple, but everyone needs to and should get exposure to those interacting with the experience. Usability testing and research shouldn't just be left for designers. That's truly the wrong mindset. You need developers, designers, those in support, and generally anyone at all creating the product to have regular contact with those using it. A good question to ask if you're working on something is, when was the last time you observed someone using the product? If it's anything beyond a week, you need to change that. There simply is no excuse to just leave this to those people that identify as designers. You can learn so much, and also as a bonus, you're going to find bugs that you can fix, which is a great bonus. There's a story I want to kind of tell, because I think it's really important when you're making something to remember this. And it's told in a lot of cultures about, without seeing people, are actually trying to describe by just touching something. So this particular object is an elephant. So somebody who would actually feel the head would say, this is a pot. Someone who would actually feel the ear would say a basket. Someone tusk would say a plowshare, or the body would maybe say, this is a granary, of course. And then maybe if they're touching the foot, they would say, no, this is a pillar. And these people aren't knowing the full picture of how can you know what you're actually creating. Truth comes from seeing the full picture, and you can only do this through user research. Without, you're just throwing design and code darts at a dartboard, but you're not even sure of the dartboard's position, shape, or even if you're in the same room, maybe in the same building, maybe in the same district as the actual board. In short, that's really not a best idea. There needs to be this common agreed set of people and types that everyone is creating for. And it shouldn't be set in stone. This is one of the problems when people talk about things like personas. They do them once and then they never iterate on them, for example. And this shouldn't be the best cases alone. Remember, we shouldn't be just creating for privilege. It should include the stress cases, those that experience outside our headspace. And this comes down to knowing, agreeing, and focusing on those that are in every situation, every single experience. And test the entire process. Don't just focus on one area. Every single thing is about experience. Testing is crucial, and if those involved in all aspects aren't living and breathing testing and what they're making, there's a huge issue there. Beyond including testing, everybody should be involved in testing outside, usability and beyond, because that term usability testing has kind of an impression about what it is specifically. So just use the word testing sometimes. And the more automated, the better when it comes to, for example, adding code or doing changes. As regression, then, if we have automation and we have testing, doesn't happen so much. And this is where developers can really help the experience. Ensure regression doesn't happen by having those rigorous, thorough testing procedures. Inside and outside testing is really going to be the glue that sticks a product together. And where possible, have mixed discipline teams. And also where possible, have mixed discipline leadership. This is also so important, as it means you get all the voices at the table together. It also ensures you encourage learning from each other. That's true design infusion. Along with this, as a community, we need to embrace and encourage hybrids. Allow people to explore across any discipline and really find their true role self and what they really are going to be doing. So I'm lucky enough, as mentioned in the intro, to be involved in a project that has brought home a lot of these things and was one of the drives for this talk for me. Gutenberg is actually the new editing experience for those of you that haven't actually heard of it. What you maybe haven't seen is the cross-discipline interactions, the way that developers have influenced design, the way designers have embraced development and explored. The term user experience developer is actually one I've used a few times to describe those I have had the pleasure to work with on a daily basis. Beyond those creating, the voice of those giving feedback has been heard by everyone, from meetups, WordCamps, site visits, from reading reviews. Exposure to every type of person has been almost, and in fact has been, a daily occurrence. Gutenberg truly has been built on the user experience bridge. So the reality is, as I wrap this up, that the user experience bridge has been built thanks to this amazing point we've reached with technology. It's now simply about crossing over, recognizing it, and then experience is going to be the thread that binds us. We can't and we shouldn't say any role is responsible for this anymore. Even if we were before, we were deluding ourselves, because spoiler, we couldn't even then. Specialism is okay in any role whatsoever. And also, being a hybrid is okay. It shouldn't be about the role or the boundary. This is about simply creating the best possible experience for anyone using the product. So I'd like to kind of leave with two warnings particularly. And the first is for designers. Don't clutch onto your titles, refusing to give them up. Don't get offended when a developer suggests something. Listen, see if maybe they have a point, because spoiler, they generally do. Make space and accommodate the fact that everyone has a say and should have a say when it comes to the experience of a product. Listen to everybody. And equally, learn about performance. Become as technical as you feel comfortable about being, and that's a really important word. We shouldn't force anyone to do anything. Embrace all sides that you want to and explore. And that way, you're going to be stronger at doing the design work that you are doing. And my second warning is for developers. Don't just say it's design. Please don't just say it's design. And don't sit back and wait for a designer to put a bird on it. You can sit in a bubble. You can't sit in a bubble anymore, not exposed to those who you're making an experience for. Get out there, get out into the field, go and meet people, go meet humans, and stop building experiences for everyone that looks like you. And also, this really comes from the bottom of my heart, stop bothering about frameworks and pointless development debates that are akin to sports fanaticism. Focus on the experience, on truly making an experience that matters for everyone that comes to use it. Ultimately, this is about understanding all the bricks that make the bridge. Meeting on the user experience bridge is not a myth, it's a basic requirement of making a product. And those experiencing the product deserve the best experience they can get. I really hope we all agree on that. It's a basic need to work for those interacting with it. We have the bridge, so really let's now meet on it. I'd like to say thank you. This link has some further reading. It also has my slides, and you can find me on Karmatos, all the things. Thank you so much.
Thanks for watching this talk from the JavaScript for WordPress conference. If you're interested in more talks like this, head over to javascriptforwp.com/conference to see an archive of all talks, as well as information about upcoming events.